we were commissioned in 2019 by Be First to do a piece of master plan for the whole of the strategic industrial location around River Road and Thames Road, where we're standing now. And Industria, our new multi-level industrial building, is right at the heart of that. So that master plan had various aims, but the main thrust of it was to propose a coherent 25 to 30 year phased master plan for the area that showed how we could intensify floor space in some parts of the industrial site, in the central parts of it, so that's where we stand now, in order to release other areas in the site for residential use. So Be First had residential areas that were severed by Thames Road, which is a very noisy, dusty, Wild West kind of industrial route that they wanted to connect better. So they wanted to rezone land from industrial to residential, and our phased master plan demonstrated how that could be done while retaining and increasing the amount of industrial floor space in the area as a whole, which is a policy requirement of the London plan. So the background to that, as I guess you're aware already, is that we've lost a huge amount of industrial floor space in London in the last 40, 50 years. A lot of it's residential use. I think we've lost something like 1,500 hectares since the year 2000. So there's a sort of structural shortage of industrial land in London, massively increasing demand for it. So as well as all the traditional industrial users, you've got logistics and internet-based businesses that are kind of fueling that requirement for industrial land. So the percentage of purchasing or retail done online just increases year on year. I think we're now at something like 30% of our shopping is carried out online. All of that's supported by logistics space and industrial space. And then COVID hit, and that obviously increased everybody's awareness of how important truck drivers and logistics sheds are, and all of those services. So that's fed into that increased industrial demand. And then really on top of that, there's a whole suite of new businesses and technologies that a lot of them fueled by the internet. So you've got all of the online grocery and delivery and ultra fast delivery services that everybody now uses, and that's part of modern city life. There's a whole series of other technological businesses like advanced manufacturing, data centers, vertical urban farming, battery buildings, and so on, that are being brought about by technological change that also occupy that same sort of industrial space. And then as well as that, there's actually quite a strong industry in the UK of smaller scale making and creative uses. So the kind of somebody who's painting artisanal tiles and selling them on Etsy, or packaging up artisanal food goods for sale, coffee, all of those types of what we term broadly new industries, smaller scale businesses. Because of the internet, those businesses are now able to scale up and sell nationally and sell globally. And so, there are areas of the world, in America and in China, Brooklyn's a really well-known example, where that sort of artisanal maker industry is now really scaled and forming a major part of the economy. And that, we're familiar with that in Hackney. That's happening in industrial estates all across London. So the increase in scale of that, along with all those other industries I've mentioned, that's all fueling desire for industrial space. So there's a structural shortage of industrial space. Rents are at an all-time high. Occupancy levels are at an all-time high in London. Land values for industrial land have gone up and up, fairly steeply over the last 10 years. So all of that has fed into the creation of policy within the London Hand protecting industrial space, and that in a way was a key driver for Be First master plan and our work in the area. So that was the piece of master planning work we were doing, and then separately to that, we were commissioned again in 2019 by Be First. We won in competition the building that we see in front of us now, Industria. So it's a UK first of its typology. So it's a multi-level ramped light industrial trading estate. There's one other ramped industrial building in the UK called X2 in Heathrow. That's fewer units. It's less units, bigger units, and it's aimed at HGV logistics users. So it's a slightly different kind of animal. That's actually quite old now. It's been occupied successfully for over a decade. But this is the first of its type, being, as I say, a multi-unit, multi-level trading estate. So in this building, we've got 47 units altogether, aimed at a really wide range of different types of industrial businesses. So all of that diverse range I've just described, but at the small to medium scale end. So the smallest units, we've got incubator startup units that are as small as 20 square meters. and then they go up to the larger light industrial warehouse units at around 500 square meters. And you can see it's quite a nice view, looking down the length of the decks from the side elevation onto the street. The building is organised as 3 levels of decks. So you've got ground, first and second floor, 3 stories of vehicle decks that are served by a helical vehicle ramp at the other side of the site within the block. Each of those stories is roughly 8 meters tall, so really tall story height for those light industrial shed or warehouse units. That allows them to have big equipment or racking in those spaces, and also to mezzanine them out. So any of the units can flexibly add a mezzanine anywhere within their floor space. And then one of our wings, so the north wing on the top floor, is subdivided into 2 floors, each of which are around 4 meters high, and those provide a slightly different type of unit. So we call those flatted factory units or maker space. They're not serviced directly by vans and vehicle decks. They've got goods lifts rising up within the building, and they tend to be the smaller units, so kind of 20 square meters up to around 300 square meters, aimed at those smaller creative users. So that's the basic structure of the building. And from an architectural point of view, I think the key moves are that we wanted, as well as to demonstrate the viability and feasibility of this brand new model of industrial space for the London market and for the UK market, and that was a core part of BFirst's brief. To also raise the bar in terms of design quality and quality of space for industrial occupiers. So we've worked really hard to introduce all of the sort of aspirations and thinking around how good the facades are, how active they are, they relate to the street, they engage with the street, and the design quality and character really and identity of the building in terms of how it's perceived from the outside and what it does for the people who work there. A traditional industrial building in the UK is a crinkly metal box with no windows on the outside, incredibly inward facing, lit from above by roof lights, with an internal yard, and typically the street frontage, if it exists, might be a chain link fence or a palisade fence with a bit of scrubby planting against it. And we definitely didn't want that for this building. We considered it to be a proper part of the city, an urban building on an urban block. So we've pushed the facade right to the edge of the site. We don't have a chain link fence, so the building itself forms the security line for the site. And we've introduced a lot of activity and quality on the facade. So the ground floor has got what we call shopfront glazing. So each unit's got a large glazed opening with doors. So it's got the potential to have an active facade and actually have a street-facing frontage as well. So you might get a Tops Tiles that's doing wholesale deliveries of tiles, but selling as a retail outlet to customers as well. We've got a cafe and co-located reception space at the front door for the building. So the aspiration for that is eventually it will be a public cafe serving the 300, 400 or so workers within the building as its core community, but giving something back to the street and the other businesses around here as well. And there's very little of that kind of amenity within the area, which is, again, really common on industrial estates around the UK. So if you're a worker in those buildings, you don't have many options to buy lunch or a nice place to sit and eat them. So raising the kind of aspiration really for what industrial workers should expect was part of our programme. And then we've also worked really hard within off-site manufactured and sort of systematized industrial cladding systems to deliver something of quality. So the ground floor frontage is formed in a precast panelized system with a Recley mold. So we've got a deep pebble texture set into those panels. We've used a pigmented concrete to bring it in to sync with the black cladding above. So every single panel is the same around the whole building. It's very systematized and organized. It's all created off-site, so it can be built very quickly without too many wet trades on site. But it's got that kind of texture and identity and quality that gives something to the street. And then above that, we've got a black panelized composite industrial cladding system. So that's basically 270 mil of rock wool sandwiched between 2 layers of metal. That fixes directly over the steel framing of the building, and your wall is finished. So it's incredibly lean, fast, traditional industrial method of building. We've tried to refine that by lining through all of the joints vertically with the windows and the joint panels below, and introducing a series of quite subtle drip and flashing details along the length that give a bit of character, break up the facades, and also allow us to hide the chunkier, not so good looking flashing details. So we work really hard with our design team in-house and then with McLaren, the main contractor, to use those very lean, cost-effective, quick industrial off-site manufacturing technologies, but in a more refined, sophisticated, good-looking way. And I think it really shows on the outside of the building. We've had a lot of compliments from people locally and people who visited on how good it looks. So we have quite a sort of sober, naturalistic palette of materials on the outside of the building: dark concrete and black metal. Then for the deck-facing facades inside the building, we wanted something that contrasted with that and was more playful and textured. So we worked with graphic designers DN & Co. To come up with a graphic language for the signage and branding on the building that also fed into our cladding design for that inside face. So we've got a grey and yellow checker patterned facade on the inner decks that then peeks out like the stripy pyjamas, as it was referred to in the DRP, onto the street facades in a couple of places. So at the deck ends and here at the entrance, as you can see. So you get a sense of that inner life and vibrancy, and there's something exciting happening inside the building that again expresses itself onto the street. So the arrangement of the building is two wings around a central vehicle yard, and again that was a kind of key move to put the vehicular movements on the inside of the block so they're not happening directly on the street, again to improve the street frontages, make it nicer for pedestrians walking past. And each of these vehicle decks, so there's 3 of those, is a two-way aisle down the middle with units either side. So the units are, as I said, 300 to 500 square metre light industrial warehouse units. They've all got a roller shutter, so you can drive a vehicle straight to the front door of the unit and load in and out, and that's really key. That's what this part of the market needs to function. So we did a lot of testing of different mixes of types of unit to sort of work out what would work best for the local market and for the building and the site. And one really important thing that came out of that is these businesses need vehicles to work and survive. They're making things, they're transporting things, they're moving them. So designing for vehicles for these types of buildings is as important as designing for people. So each unit gets a roller shutter and an entrance door, and space for parking or loading between 3 to 6 vehicles depending on the size of the unit, as part of their demised loading yard off the central route. And then the upper decks are serviced via a helical van ramp. So HGVs and larger vehicles can come into the ground floor, and there's a dedicated HGV loading bay on one side, which is next to the goods lift. So any business that needs a delivery that can only come on an HGV, certain types of palletized delivery, can come in to that position and load and service any part of the building. But most of the servicing is done by white van and larger panel vans. So our ramp can take, it's up to 3 metres of height, 7.5 metre long, 7.5 tonne panel van, which is the sort of standard unit of servicing for these types of business. There are other models being developed and that exist abroad, which allow bigger vehicles to go up to upper levels, so big Arctics or HGVs for logistics, or 10 metre rigids. And depending on the size of your site, that might be possible. But here, because it's a relatively small site, 8,000 square metre footprint of the site itself, we've really maxed it out and got the biggest building we think we can on the site, and that has determined, along with the market and the types of businesses we're aiming for, the fact that it's van service only to those upper decks. So in terms of numbers, we deliver nearly 12,000 square metres of floor space across those 3 levels on an 8,000 square metre site. So that's a 150% plot ratio in terms of the level of intensification we're achieving. So it's roughly 3 times the amount of business space and employment on the site that you'd get on a traditional industrial estate. So that's fantastic, obviously. And as we've said, land in London is really scarce. We're trying to intensify, so trying to deliver as much local economy benefit and employment space benefit as we can on constrained sites. And we sincerely believe this is the first of many of these types of buildings that are going to be built in London. That process has happened quite slowly, and this building is really important in proving to investors and proving to the sort of private development market that these buildings are feasible and can work. Everybody's watching it with bated breath to see if it lets out. I think we've got 3 or 4 units under offer now, having just started marketing it formally a few weeks ago, and they're a kind of really interesting range. I think there's a lift rope manufacturer is one of those, and an artisanal bakery that's coming in. So you can already start to see that range of users that might occupy the building. So we have 3 goods lifts serving the upper floors. They're 2.5 ton or 3 ton goods lifts, big enough to fit a whole pallet and a pallet mover into. So the way that goods would be moved around horizontally in the building would be most likely to be on manual or electric pallet movers. We've got scope, and we have the floor loadings and the height to use forklifts on the upper floors, but most of these businesses probably wouldn't because of the heights of the units. So everything's designed to be big enough and robust enough to move those kind of loads around. So that we've got very wide corridors on these 2 flatted factory floors. So these are 3.5 metre wide. So 2 of those pallet movers could pass each other without causing a snarl up. Quite big lobby areas that service the goods lifts. And then you can see the kind of checker plate protection all down these communal service spaces to protect the partitions from the inevitable kind of bashing around that it's going to get from the tenants. Our client for the project was Be First, but the GLA were involved as a stakeholder. There was something like £1 million of good growth funding that went into helping the project get off the ground, and along the way it was discussed and negotiated between Be First and the GLA that the GLA might take a head lease over 50% of the floor area and actually underwrite it. But I think what has happened is during the time of the project being developed and the build, actually the industrial markets has got stronger and stronger, and in the end Be First have felt confident enough that they didn't need that underwriting of the head lease. They've taken on ownership and being the landlord for the whole of the property, and they're the ones managing the process for letting it out. So they want to hold the building as an asset. You know, it's an incredible rent earner once it gets going, as an asset for Barking, and as a model for showing other developers around here that it can be done successfully. In this part of Barking, it's a good example of a London industrial estate where there's all this amazing stuff and work happening, and creativity and things that contribute to the whole city happening inside these dumb windowless sheds that nobody ever goes into. So most people, your sort of average member of the public, or even design professionals and so on, construction professionals, don't really know what happens in industrial estates and don't go into those. So part of what this building does, we hope, is celebrate all of that that creativity and economy, show it to the world, make people notice it, and actually create visibility of it to the world. So again, we think, you know, that's something that the whole of the industrial design market in the UK is sort of waking up to slowly, and we hope this building advances that conversation and promotes it.